Welcome back, everyone. We are here for round 2 of the Roundtable discussion. We've got Lotus Sky, Mona, Paola, and Admaira here. So excited to have you all here. And let's go ahead and just get right back into it. We were talking a lot about spiritual bypassing and an energy of understanding how we are working through the spiritual industry with the way in which things have been polarized and the way in which things have kind of just not been equal in a lot of ways. And so I think Lotus Sky, you wanted to share, so go for it.
Yeah, where we left off was around cultural appropriation of other people's traditions. You know, Paola gave the example about a white wizard who was really good at what he was doing, that was kind of like the name in cacao ceremonies in Guatemala, but yet not so much like the actual like indigenous elders who held the medicine. And so we spoke around claiming our own heritage, claiming our own spiritual heritage, and the rich spiritual culture behind that as well. I mean, you know, sometimes I wish I was white so I can get into Celtic culture, but I really just dabble in that anyways already, you know? So there's just some interesting richness, you know, and what I'll share to that too is that that is that there's also, I think, a difference between cultural appropriation and like sincere spiritual study and initiation. So Paola is a yogi. Can I tell her like you can't do yoga because you're not Indian? Like, I don't think so, because she actually has studied and is really devoted and respectful to the spirit of yoga and is growing in that and recognizes her growth in that. And she honors that tradition. It's not yoga for fitness, you know, it's not like industrialized like yoga where you don't honor like where you come from. And same thing with, you know, particularly with like plant medicine ceremonies, right? Like the keepers are, you know, like they're, you know, for ayahuasca in South America, or peyote in Central America and North America. So I do know people who are not of that lineage, who studied with the lineage and really like kind of paid deep respect for it, who are carriers of that medicine, and went through that level of initiation, and also honor their teachers, honor their lineage, and practice reciprocity. So I think that's the important part of it, is the practicing of reciprocity and not erasure. Not like, hey, welcome to my ayahuasca ceremony and let's drink. You know, there's just like a level of reverence to the traditions, reverence to the medicine keepers, and reciprocity to support like those tribes, those medicine people in that. And that's my perspective on that part, where spiritual practices get to be shared by all as we go into that unity consciousness, while respecting the origins of them, and not taking it and making it an identity, and making it a fad or a disrespect or erasure of the original medicine keepers, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such an important point to make, the idea of really knowing the difference and being able to discern between someone who is not honoring the true traditions and hasn't done that work to study and be fully initiated into those practices, and the difference between that and the difference and those who haven't, you know, who have just kind of decided, hey, I'm going to do yoga, you know, I'm going to be a yoga teacher, hey, I'm going to do ayahuasca ceremonies, and really haven't studied, you know, the true forms of it. Because ultimately, going back to the source of where these practices came from makes those practices most potent, right? So when people are kind of just adopting these practices without any of that understanding or knowledge, the actual things that they're bringing forth aren't really going to be potent in the magic that tradition actually holds, because those things aren't bringing forth. So it's actually causing a very empty practice itself when the facilitator doesn't, you know, honor that. And so it's definitely a facilitator responsibility. So, you know, any of you who are, you know, looking to do yoga training or teacher training, or who are, you know, looking to host ceremonies or cacao ceremonies or things like that, it's not that you can't do it, but do it with respect to the tradition. Do it with honor to really bringing forth the true magic of that practice by immersing yourself in the true form, in the true source of that energy. Because when you can do that, you're actually really honoring the practice. You're really bringing forth the magic, and you're really going to make more of an impact than if you just ignore that stuff. Yeah. Anybody else want to share to that before we pull another question?
I guess I'd also just like to mention the mindfulness that's needed with certain practices where, like, I know there's so much trauma that is formed within the indigenous communities, considering colonization and the continuation of that. And so I do know just of many indigenous healers and, like, you know, herbalists, and the respect that they do demand. And so I feel like for folks practicing things that they don't really even know someone who's native to those traditions, like, you know, maybe if you can't even have those genuine conversations, maybe you shouldn't practice it. And it's like, it's not to the point where it's like, don't do this, you can't do it. It's just like, think about their history, think about their experiences. Like, do you really want to cause more trauma by not even knowing the origins or the truth to it, you know? So there's just so many, there's like, it's harmful. And I feel like it does have like a bigger impact in society when you're taking things that, you know, like y'all mentioned, like where you're not respecting or appreciating the truth and the origination of it, the origin. So yeah, just to really like emphasize what y'all mentioned, and just to recognize like some things like you shouldn't do.
It's as simple as that. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Some things are just not meant for you to do, you know, and it's about being aligned, you know. Like, I think there's also this idea, what I've noticed in the spiritualist community, which is like this desire to do it all, like to be the all healer, like the all powerful healer, the all powerful luminary. Like, I'm doing yoga and intuition and readings and ceremonies and astrology and all these things. And it's like, okay, we understand that thirst for service and for knowledge and for light and enlightenment, but also honoring that, you know, going back to what we were talking about, the movement, like we all have a role, we all have a purpose, we all have a soul purpose, and most of us didn't come here to do it all. A lot of us came here to be experts in and masters in what we chose to do for our soul purpose, whether that's hosting ceremony or coaching, you know, intuition, or being an activist, or, you know, or a healer. You know, those are our roles. And so when we start to try to be it all, we actually lose the potency of our power to do that one thing we're actually meant to do so powerfully and impactfully in our world. So, you know, we don't have to do it all. We can actually just honor our unique skills, our unique traditions, our unique genes and cultures, and bring that into our purpose and just honor that. There's no need to be like, you know, this competitiveness. I feel like everybody wants to do it all, and like, oh, I do that too, or oh yeah, I do that too, or like, you know, it's just like, why don't we just let each other have our thing, right? I notice that so much. Like, it's something that kind of just drives me crazy, because it doesn't really feel loving.
Right.
When you're maybe talking about like your expertise, and then somebody else is like, oh yeah, like I actually do that too, and I this is how I do it, and it's just like, okay, but where is the respect for how I do it, you know? And so when it comes to honoring culture and tradition, like really understanding that if you're talking to someone who is actually aligned to the ancestors that are bringing forth that practice, like give them the voice. Right?
Yes.
Give them the voice.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, that's real. That is real. It doesn't even matter like if you trained with, you know, like another person, like, or you studied it for longer. If someone is of that heritage, like you get to really honor them for for having it in their lineage.
Yeah,
And that's
bloodline.
respect. I love what Admaira said too around like, you need to be sensitive. It like if it's something that you're making all these elixirs and you're picking up these herbs because you picked up a book, that's great. That, like you're dabbling in that, that's fine. But like if you're really going to make this part of your like vocation, there is some deeper studying meant to be had there. And like the ethics of it, really consider the ethics of what you're doing, so you're not just doing what seems cute and fun and everyone's doing it. You're losing the depth when you do that. like it's like cacao, I love cacao, like oh my god, you know, like I'm gonna do cacao ceremonies. And so, but like don't call it a cacao ceremony, or do a disclaimer, this is not a traditional cacao ceremony. This is an intuitive neo-shamanic ceremony where we just, like do some intuitive stuff, you know. So that's respect, right? And understanding.
Yeah, calling it what it is and not trying to make it something that it's not, just being honest. And it's okay if it's not traditional, but like say that and honor that you haven't done that study so that that's clear to the people receiving that. Yeah, for sure. Anyone else want to share before we pull another question?
Definitely know how that feels. Rissa, you know a little bit about my background. Well, you know a lot about my background, and recently.
Feel free to share too, love. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm Muslim and I come from North Africa. And recently, it's been a trend going around. A lot of African Americans, and I get it. I understand a lot of culture has been lost, but North Africa, and particularly where I'm from, is not a place I've ever heard anyone speak of. But recently, within past month or so, all of a sudden everyone's embracing my culture, yet you don't speak my language, you don't eat my food, you've never been there. So I feel some type of way. I'm like, wow, all of a sudden everyone's from Mauritania, but I've heard people fight about Mauritania. Where is Mauritania? You know what I mean? And it's like, it's disingenuous, it's not respectful. It's like, I would love to sit down with you and have a conversation about where I'm from and teach you, but you just hijacking it is like, I just feel like, you know, and someone sent me something speaking on my country before, and it was completely made up. And it was like, before Mauritania was called Mauritania, and it was this, and I was like, wait a minute. Mauritania was always Mauritania. Before you send me anything, please know that this is my culture, this is my history. Please don't send me anything telling me before it was called Mauritania. It was always Mauritania, you know? So it can be a bit offensive, you know, but I get it. I think like African-American people are wounded a lot, you know what I mean? They lost a lot. And not even African-American, but just in general, our Caucasian brothers and sisters, they have lost a lot. They don't know their historic culture. So I think it's become a fad to grab onto anything that you like. And just like Lotus Sky was saying, you know, you go into these mystical shops and these healing shops and everything's like Celtic and it's very whitewashed. Except for Egyptian. If you want anything that has to do with Africa, it's always Egyptian. But Africa is a huge continent and there's so much more than just Egyptian. And yes, I get, we all have that experience. We've been birthed here over and over. We have that connection with Egypt, but it's also programming. You know what I mean? Like when you speak of Africa, the first thing, Egyptian. I mean, if it's not Celtic or what, name a couple of them.
Native American, Celtic, Egyptian, yeah. Or yeah,
Egyptian,
or like yeah.
And it's actually, you know what? That would be something that if I had to say, I would like to see as a change. I would like to walk into some of these shops and talk to them and say, you know, spirituality is way more and it's broader, and there's something, you know, we can offer. We can do some more research and find out other things. Like I recently learned from my own culture that the tarot card came from my people. It originated from Islamic soldiers that were called Mamluks that went into Spain that would play a card game. Yet I've clicked on people's profiles, they completely removed that part and say it came from Spain. You know, completely remove the whole part of the Islamic soldiers teaching them the game before they took the cards and recreated and painted pictures on the cards, you know? And it's just like, I feel like it is like, sometimes it can be triggering, it can be overwhelming, it can feel like what is the word I'm looking for? It can feel overwhelming to see people grasp and take your culture and hold it and act as if they know more about your culture than you, and you're born into it. You know what I mean? Like I've had people tell me to remove my hijab before that were reverts. You know what I mean? And that were Caucasian, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, really? So I should remove something that is part of my history, part of my culture, part of my spirituality, part of my crown. Like my grandmother taught me, that's your crown, you know, you protect your hair, you know, like, you know, and I should remove it because I'm not wearing it the way you think I should wear it.
Right.
You see? So it can be a bit overwhelming at times. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so important to really understand. And you're so right, all of you, about that lack of representation of the broad scale of culture and spirituality and tradition. And it really does come from, you know, indigenous peoples. Like that's where all this stuff comes from. And so it's like, why are we not talking about that? Why isn't that the first thing we discuss when bringing forth a tradition or a ceremony or a, you know, a energy or event that is rooted in that kind of stuff? So it's so important. And I love the solutions that you all offer too, like more representation in crystal shops, really having people reach out to learn from those traditions right directly, going to the source, and also just claiming and stating very honestly when they haven't done that, and making sure that that's clear as to respect the culture. So thank you for those solutions. I'm so glad that we can have conversations about the contrast and then bring forth this energy and understanding of solutions, because that's really why I wanted to bring this event forth, is that, you know, all these things going on in our world, all this contrast, all this duality, all this shadow work we're doing within ourselves and as a collective and in our own communities. It's so important to be able to not feel so overwhelmed by it that we forget that we can also create solutions and talk about those. So it really helps us heal, and it helps us carry the weight of those shadows when we can focus on solutions, because it helps us to invoke change. That's the way of transmuting it, right? All right, anybody else want to share on that topic before we pull another question out of the bowl? No? Good. All right, let's see what we got. All right. Okay, let me know how you guys feel about this question, because we might have already covered it. And if you feel like we've covered it, we'll move to another question. The question is, how can spiritualists like ourselves shine light on revolution, specifically the isms or systems of oppression in this world? I think that's kind of a unique question. I think we can probably go off that, right? Let me read it again. How can spiritualists like ourselves shine light on revolution, specifically the isms or systems of oppression in this world?
I feel like we answered it.
You feel like it?
I feel like.
Does anybody want to share? Does anyone want to add to it? Maybe just anything that they haven't said or haven't shared?
I like to share a little bit on that, because I think in a sense we have answered that question, and but I mean always, like, repetition is always nice, you know, to just like to just bring it forth, and I think the thing that I'll always just kind of like come back to is just allowing ourselves to always just make sure that we are allowing ourselves to see where that is also being like illuminated within ourselves, like shining that light on ourselves first, like really shining that light like on ourselves first before we just go and be like, hey, look at this, you know, to another person. It's just really like just taking that light that we're just like, it just kind of like, boop, you know, and just like really like facing it towards ourselves. And I know that that's just something that I, as a spiritual being, have been really, really tuning into, and because, like you said, and it just kind of like, and everybody like really knowing what their place and their role is in this time and when we allow ourselves to just shine light on ourselves with all of the isms, like, you know, whether that is, I mean, I don't know if they're all isms, but I know what the question means by like isms, you know. It's just like the separation within ourselves, like any racism within ourselves, like and judgment within ourselves, and suppression within ourselves, and just like shining light. Because when we get to see that within ourselves, and we can create, like I mentioned before, it's just like you create a bridge of like, okay, before I come at you, like, at least for me, is that before going externally on anything, like as spiritual beings, we get to take responsibility into first shining light on ourselves, on it. Just like really just like being like, okay, like what am I, like, where is this even present within myself, you know? Because when something that I've been present to is just like, what if everything does dismantle? Like, what if everything does go through? Like, everything goes through. Like, everything that we're fighting for goes through. But we still have judgment within ourselves, and we still have separation within ourselves, and we're still like oppressing ourselves in different ways. Then it in a way to fully be to 100 and 1,000,000% transmute that energy to just really create the shift is just really important to like bringing the light towards ourselves and in the shadows, like into our own shadows, to be able to fully, like, that just actually expands the amount of light that we get to hold in our capacity. And then when we come back of just like, oh, I've already shined light on those shadows within myself, so I can understand and be compassionate and really just see you eye to eye on this. Even if the experience is not the same, like I can truly see you eye to eye because I've shined light on those shadows within myself. Yeah.
That is so powerful. I love that. Yeah, because when we do the shadow work internally, then that allows for us to really affect the shadows externally, and to be able to feel fierce enough and fearless enough and courageous enough and have the know-how to do that. And that helps for it to not be as overwhelming. And it also helps, like you said, Paola, for us to be compassionate as we move through the changes. Because I think what I've noticed in all of this too is that I was kind of sharing this with my audience last week in the weekly reading, that we're all going through, like, the collective in this shift. We're like, I feel like we're in like an adolescent phase as a collective. Like, we're awkward. We're like kind of in our ego a lot. We're in our shadow. We think we know more than we do. We want to talk about it before we think about it, or we want to do things before we think. You know, we're not taking time to think before we speak, or think before we act, or be centered. And when we're in that adolescent phase, you know, we're maturing. So we're learning how to do those things. So we're going to make mistakes in order for ourselves to learn how to do it better. And it's something that we all have to understand too. I think the hyper judgment can be really disserving as well, and just destructive, because we also have to see how people are they're going to have to stumble a little bit. They're going to have to fall on their face. They're going to have to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. But that will help them get back to, you know, what they're meant to do and what they're meant to see. And so if we can be guides that are graceful and loving amidst that, and also educating them and helping them to see things clearly, like we're doing here on this call and on this beautiful, you know, roundtable, then we're really doing our work. So it's powerful. I think we lost Paola, but I'm sure she'll probably come back on. So wait for her to come back on. But if anybody wants to share from that, and then I'll ask another question before we end today. Oh, there's Paola. She's coming back in. All right, here she is.
I feel like I can share just a bit, just re-emphasizing. I feel like Paola couldn't have emphasized enough, like how to shine light within yourselves and really in those dark, shadowy places. And I feel like, you know, when we're very spiritual, it's hard for us to really want to recognize the systems that are impacting us all. And it can be more difficult, or it's just like being so empathic, like it doesn't feel good, you know, tuning into those experiences that are more systematic. So I feel like when we are shining light within ourselves and really recognizing our positionality and, you know, the ways that we've been colonized, I guess, and unlearning those things, we shouldn't be afraid to really tune into the larger picture, whether it's on a spiritual like in the spiritual collective, or, you know, a lot of folks are being impacted systematically. So if we want to tune into how folks are just experiencing things differently than others who have had, I don't want to say more elevation, but maybe just more privileges and experiences that help them get on their spiritual journey quicker. So just being able to recognize our position and things like that, and shining light and not being afraid to dive into learning about it, because I feel like it can be scary. Maybe you feel guilty for having privilege in ways, and, you know, we feel guilty because we had this. Like, it's just, it's understandable, but it's not necessary. Like, we're allowed to feel those things without judging ourselves. You know, we can feel confused when we're learning how to hold space for people that have had different experiences than us, and maybe they deserve to be elevated. You know, a trans healer deserves to be elevated because, you know, their representation is lacking, you know, in those spaces a lot of times. So just recognizing that it's okay to go through the motions of unlearning and unpacking and taking on those challenging steps towards decolonizing, and just like further, I feel like, erasing the boundaries that we have in our hearts because of what we've learned growing up, for many of us growing up in the West, you know. So I feel like we shouldn't be afraid. We should really just, like, yes, we can be nervous. It's scary shit out here, but like, how are we going to move forward, and how are we going to grow and learn from each other, and really just like shine light on those dark areas in us and our positionality. So I appreciate you emphasizing that, Paola.
Yeah, so beautiful. So with that being said, everyone, I want to give us all just one quick opportunity for some closing statements. And what I would love for all of you to bring forth in these closing statements is just whatever advice you have for the viewers during this time, whether it be to help promote change or to help heal within themselves, whatever they're going through and how they're feeling all of this energy empathically, whatever you feel like could really help the viewers in shining light on revolution and being able to just feel that harmony, equality, and peace within themselves during this time. So whoever wants to start with a brief closing statement.
I'll go. Oh, is Lotus going? Me? Okay.
Go for it, yeah.
I would like to say thank you for this opportunity. I absolutely adore all of you guys. If there's anything that I would like to say is that we are more alike than we are different. We stand to learn from each other. There's always something new. If you think you know it all, you know nothing at all. And don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Don't be afraid to go up to your neighbor and ask the questions that maybe you lacked, you never learned. Don't be afraid to stand up, speak out if you see some injustice happening, with fear of being retaliated against or bullied or look upon differently. Be the voice, be the change. And that's all. That's all I have to say.
So beautiful. Thank you. Who else would like to close?
I can share something. I'm gonna just channel it through. So essentially, this work is ongoing. It's not an event, and it is a practice. And when we are so used to a way of being for so long, it's going to take conscious awareness and practice to be different, to do different, and to create different in our lives consciously. So definitely our own personal healing is important. absolutely it is necessary to look within ourselves where we play out the root frequencies of what we're seeing in our consciousness. Absolutely. Healing the othering of ourselves to others and othering others, the healing of violence within ourselves and to others energetically in all forms, and energetically, physically, emotionally, verbally, etc. Healing these things. Healing, releasing competition, like all of these like root frequencies that we're playing out in our own individual world will be reflected in our collective. So it has to first start within. And we, in order to transmute low frequencies, we cannot meet it with the same frequency. And that is the trick, you know, that really is the trick. We cannot meet it with the same frequency. If we're going to go to a high frequency, we need to divest completely from that frequency. And it's going to be hard because we're so used to meeting where someone is at. We're so used to mirroring, right? And it takes a level of knowing your divinity and unlimited being to be able to know that you can stand in a higher frequency and create the new system, create the new world together. We like how I see it is that this is what we stand for. You leaders can get in alignment or we will not participate and you will be obsolete, is your choice. But this is happening. And the more we can enroll into that energy and enroll people to the new vision, the more we're going to move forward rather than fighting, especially using modalities that the other people are so well equipped for. You know, we need to work in a different element. And this is an element of consciousness and is an element of really truly being our brother's keeper. So in addition to our individual work, we get to also crystallize the world we want to see in the world. So it's not just like, okay, I'll just stay in a high frequency and my work is done. We are in a material world. So our actions and what we do to contribute to society means that we get to go out there and crystallize these new systems. So maybe you're not a healer, maybe you're just here, maybe you are spiritual but not a healer, maybe you are actually in really good at organization, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're an artist. Like each medicine can be in contribution to the new world you want to be in. And that's where I stand. That's where I stand. And so divesting emotionally, financially, energetically, this is where I'm seeing the new activism happening, and unifying, especially. I see a world where the police become obsolete simply because it was inherited from a slave patrol, simply because it was based off of frequencies that rooted from punishment, intimidation, hierarchy, et cetera, and that's just not part of the new world. It's not part of the frequency of the new earth. You know, I see them being replaced by stewards of the community, really, truly, where I actually get to feel safe and not nervous when I see them around, you know? So start thinking of what the new earth looks like, what it really looks like, and don't compromise on that vision. Don't compromise on that vision because it is coming. And start divesting away from things that are not in alignment with that. And when you start to divest from that, you're going to literally manifest new ways of being and new groups, new ways of relating to new systems of being, right? And that's how we're going to create it. We cannot, yeah, that's all I'm going to say. And the last thing I'll say is around tuning into your frequency so that you're in expansion rather than contraction. So a responsibility versus reactivity. And as soon as we're able to really speak in a way that is unifying and enrolling, doing all the self-care you can in order to use your voice to enroll, because that's what leaders are, they're enrolling to a new vision, then you'll grow. We will grow, and this is going to be really cool. And I'm so glad that we're creating this right here and now. These are exciting times to be alive. It's also very heartbreaking times, but they're necessary times. And in the bigger picture, we know where we're going to end up, and that is a peaceful, unified world, unity in our diversity. And so it is.
Oh, and so it is. Yes.
And so it is.
Go for it. Admaira or Paola, would you like to close with a closing statement?
Yeah, I'll go. I love that. Thank you for just emphasizing the thoughts in my head were also dream space, creating that dream space, continuing to pour into that dream space of what we're trying to build here, what we're trying to grow into, you know. Part of our philosophy as BLM is 75% create and construct and 25% deconstruct. So that divesting, you know, that, you know, just protecting ourselves and pouring into what is necessary for our health and our well-being and our joy, you know, just really pouring into things, into pouring into ourselves it's just vital. It's vital during these times, and protecting each other and holding each other tight. And I think it's just so important, you know, to hold space for each other and really, really hold space intentionally for each other and everything that we have with our capacities, of course. And that's why self-care is also so important in this movement, so we can have the strength in community and continue to pour into community and pour into ourselves. And it's just going to be a very reciprocal thing when this all carries out, right? So when the revolution has been won and we're building and we realize we've built something that is strong and loving and just very much accepting. And so it's tough sometimes in these streets when you're around and you're protesting and you're doing all this work, or, you know, maybe you're not protesting and you feel like you need to do all this work. You know, we got to take it one step at a time, intentionally, mindfully, just a lot of self-awareness, so we can hold space for each other in just the most grounding ways, and continue to build and build and build and grow, and, you know, internally, externally.
Yes, thank you, Admaira. Couple more minutes left. Paola, would you like to briefly close?
Yes, man. I just like, I'm also like in like a position of a viewer, you know, where I'm like, you know, like just like really, you know, really receiving everybody's messages. And I think that like so much of what everybody has already shared, and I think it's just like really you know, like bringing forth like the importance of our just, you know, like how Admaira shares, just like really bringing forth that the importance of our own like approaching it in a way that we take care of ourselves, because us like exhausting ourselves, like it's really not going to help anybody. You know, like you might actually like lead us into a space where we feel so depleted that we might unintentionally or even subconsciously like give the power away, you know, like in that way. And just also like something that I want to bring forth is actually a message from a deck that I have. Is called the Wisdom Keepers. And, you know, I can also just share, you know, like some details on that as well, like later, if anybody's interested in it. It was gifted to me by Lotus Sky, so thank you, shout out. And something on that is actually that it's a card around guidance, and a message that it says is that the ultimate leader is the ultimate listener. And something that's also really like that is shared like through that message of that card, like the card of guidance. It really brings forth the story of a leader who really began to understand that every single person is capable enough and wise enough to be of contribution to the path of the people. And really understanding that in like the less that one can project like their own individual agendas onto something, it actually allows for even more space for a collective rise to happen, to where everybody are really just kind of like owning their own medicine. And so just bringing that importance of that silence, you know, that silence, and that having that silence being intentional to listen. And from that as well, I do want to point out that if there's like any overwhelm, as you know, like if there's any overwhelm, it's just like allow yourself to also be supported. Like allow yourself to also be supported, and allow yourself to be held, allow yourself to be heard as well. It's just like if you want to have like different conversations, if you have in different, you know, like inner dialogues that you want to be able to have with another person, or just like, you know, whether it is like within you know, your community, and as well as outside of the community, like Lotus Sky shared at the, you know, at the beginning, which is like putting yourself actually like in the outside of the circles as well, but also being very present of your circle as well, and just like really just allowing yourself to receive support in the things that that you're learning or beginning to unlearn. Like allow yourself to just be humble and vulnerable and courageous enough to say, I really have no idea like what to do in this space, or actually like I would love to help, but I'm just overwhelmed. And like I am humbly like stating that because I don't know what to do. So like if there's any you know, like somebody that you know that could be able to guide you into that direction, like it makes a huge difference to just know that we can get that support. So those are just like the things that I'd like to share, is just like really taking care of ourselves in that way, as well as seeing the bigger and the smaller picture simultaneously, allowing yourself to receive support, and just really trusting, like if there is in any way, shape, or form that we can bring ourselves into deep trust that if this time is meant to happen, then like if we allow ourselves to show up authentically and embracing the diversity that we are, embracing the diversity that we all have even within ourselves, you know, and just embracing like, oh wow, you know what, like I'm unique, and that's beautiful, and that's powerful, and I'm different, and that's the beauty and the power that I hold. And then just like bringing all of that forth. I feel like I tapped into like different things, but I hope that it like just really seals it in together for us to really see. And I know Admaira mentioned that, and you know, everybody as well, to just really be so radically present to how that it's an internal and an external revolution that is happening, and we really get to do that work within ourselves. So as mindfully as we approach it within, that's as how it is that we get to approach it outside, like with the intention of alchemy, with the intention of entirely transmuting into something new, and not meeting it like this, but rather, you know, like with martial arts, and this is something that I love to share that's just like really coming through, is like the practice of hapkido, to where you actually don't meet it with force, but you actually like invite it, and you use that same energy, and then you just kind of like transmute it, and then it turns into like a bigger thing. You know, so it's just like really transmuting that, and however it is that we can do that, and just like Lotus Sky said, is to materialize the vision that we're holding for all of us as we go through this awakening, rebirth, revolution process.
Yes. I am so grateful for all of you. Like I was fighting tears hearing all of your closing statements, because it's so powerful to have you all share your voice, and the way in which you've shared all the things you've shared has really hit my heart, and I know it's hit the hearts of everyone watching. And I encourage all of you watching, if you didn't see part 1 of the roundtable discussion, make sure to go back and watch that. The replays of all of the events of this healing event is available to you on the replays forever on YouTube. So please watch these over and over. Send these to friends that you want to open up uncomfortable conversations with and have these kind of revolutionary talks with. And use that as a tool to do so, to amplify the voices that need to be amplified, and to really understand your perspectives. And I'm just so grateful for all of you being a part of this roundtable. This has been such a vision for me, to have all these voices, different and unique, but also harmonizing into one, to really lead by example for everyone else, to show that it's possible to have different opinions, or to have somewhat different opinions, and to be able to find a common ground, respect each other, love each other through it, and work together to create solutions as we shine light on revolution. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Lotus Sky. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Admaira. Thank you, Paola. I'm so grateful to have you all. I will also mention to all the viewers, we are donating to BLM Phx Metro. So the link will be in the description on all of the events, so that if you're interested in donating, that you can do so right through that link. We really encourage that. That support of the movement is so powerful, and that can be just one way that you can action the change and action your support of the movement and of this revolution. Thank you all so much again. After this event, we will have resource sharing by Admaira, so stick by for that, and we will see you then. Thank you all so much.